So Xena is a threat intelligence analyst in the financial services industry. She is also graduate graduate of Science Women's Academy with 7 global information assurance certifications. She is doing his PhD in cybersecurity at Marymount University. She is also a member of different cybersecurity communities and is a frequent speaker at several events like DERCOM, DEFCOM, etc. So every breath you take, Xena, it's your time. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much for the introduction. I assume you can see the slides?
Yes.
Yes? Okay. So I am a CTI analyst, and I thought, what happens if I apply CTI methodology to something that isn't necessarily as conventional, such as stalkerware, right? Normally that's associated with domestic violence, people in experiencing intimate partner violence. Like, how could that possibly apply to corporate America? So sit back, relax, and I will step you through the methodology and reasoning and some CTI techniques as far as how to take a complex subject and see whether or not it can be applied to corporate land, right? So for the lawyers, I am not speaking on behalf of anyone other than myself. This is a disclaimer for the lawyers, of course. And you also can find me on Twitter at Cheerio, CH33R10. So I'm gonna do a very brief overview of what it is, how it works, some of the tradecraft, this was really fun, and some hypotheses that I have. And at the very end, I have a treat for some of the technical people. So basically, stalkerware allows you to spy on people. I mean, that's basically narrowing it down to the most simplest terms possible. The Citizens Lab, they do a ton of research on this, and it's basically software that's used to facilitate intimate partner violence. Like whatever is going on with relationships, that it's basically a digital means to keep control of people. And some of the tools that can be used for intimate partner violence is just your regular commodity stalkerware. I could pull up Google right now and get a free one if I wanted. Spyware, of course, for mobile devices, dual use apps. So I can track your location, you know, hey honey, put this on your phone, and then I'll know everywhere you are and how long you stay there. MRATs, of course, shared accounts, and OSINT, social media, friends, family. So I could be like, hey, you know, boyfriend's cousin, like, was he really at that place or was he somewhere else? So just social engineering techniques with friends and family as a form of harassment. So commodity stalkerware, if you look at it, there's basically different tiers of what people pay for with stalkerware, with commodity stalkerware. So it goes from the basic, like, I can read your text messages, I can read your call logs, I can look at everywhere you browsed on your phone, to your general location, right? And then it goes up from there. So I can gain access to your social media accounts, like I can do a lot if I want it to be bad, right? I can look at your files. Here's just all of these icons. I can record video. I can listen to your voicemails. I can read all your email. I can change your phone settings. I can delete whatever I want. Like, it pretty much gives me really good access to basically your life and your mind. And here's a Citizens Lab. They did a report and they have different stalkerware variants. So Cerberus, you can look it up right now and download a copy for you. And FlexiSpy and some of the other ones, MobiStealth, MSpy. So these are just ones to keep in mind as you're out there looking at things. Here's some other names of stalkerware vendors. So how does it work? basically, I'm going to focus more on Android devices because the Apple iPhones, they require to be jailbroken. And basically what they do with that, if it isn't jailbroken, then they use your iCloud account and spy on you that way. So there's that. I'm not an iOS Apple expert, so that's about my limited understanding with that. I'm sorry. As far as Android's concerned, that one is fun because if they modify a certain couple settings, which I'll talk about later, and which is in a report that I've provided for you to put in your tip if you want, your threat intelligence platform. So the attacker needs physical access to the device, and then they modify some settings, and then they install the Stalkerware. So as a CTI analyst, I love the kill chain because it's easy to map back to that, right? So you have your reconnaissance, they do recon on, I'll just use me as an example so that I stay safe. So, you know, let's say I'm a bad person and I want to put Stalkerware on someone's device, I would look at what they could possibly be interested in and use that as a lure, or be like, oh, honey, like, I see your hands are full of stuff. Why don't I just, you know, hold your phone for you so it doesn't drop? Because I don't want you to break your screen, right? And then while he's distracted, I, you know, gain access to it and do what I want. Weaponization, so that's basically just getting the URL from Stalkerware so that you can install it after you, of course, purchase the service. And then delivery, like I said, tricking whoever it is to gain access to the physical device. If I were a bodybuilder, which I'm not, which means if I were stronger, I could potentially threaten physical violence to gain access to the physical device. And then the good thing though about commodity Stalkerware for Android devices is that there are no technical exploits. So it's just basically social engineering, which is obviously a problem. And then of course, installation. The Stalkerware vendors are so nice. They have 24/7 service where basically you can call at, you know, 3 in the morning because he or she is asleep and you're like, I need help. I can't figure out how to enter it. So they accommodate any requests. They're very helpful. So commodity Stalkerware, it's very easy to use. It's, depending upon where it is, at least in the United States, it's legal-ish. And it's very cheap, very, very cheap. And all I need is just to trick whoever it is to give me physical access. So the MRAT is cheap-ish. It requires a little bit more technical sophistication and skill. And the other thing is it's generally illegal, generally. So of course, no CTI talk would be complete without the MITRE attack. So one of the interesting things here, if you look at the MITRE attack, they actually have tactics and techniques for mobile devices. So for me, because I was a victim of Stalkerware for about 2 years, the person that did it against me, he used dental mold to lift my prints to gain access to one of my devices. And I was like, whoa, mind blown. Like, I was in the shower. I didn't even expect it. So that's actually a MITRE attack technique, not specifically dental mold, but lock screen bypass. So people get very creative with gaining access to your device. I know, I lived it. So the wonderful thing about the Stalkerware Citizens Lab report is that they also tested the various Stalkerware variants for AV detection. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is it. This is it. Because basically, you know, you look at how Stalkerware is, you look at MRATs or different malware, it has very similar capabilities and like how it operates, right? The only difference is how it's generally used, which, I mean, duh, hackers repurpose stuff all the time, right? And so the wonderful thing, or the scary thing about Stalkerware is that it has a very, very low AV detection, just because people don't really see it as a serious issue since it's domestic violence related. And I'm saying software that has malicious behaviors is bad, period, regardless of how it's branded or how people market it. The wonderful thing about this, though, and this report, is that the EFF and Ava Galperin are in the process of talking with various AV vendors to actually get them to alert on Stalkerware on people's phones. So that's a definite plus. So now I'm going to go into the traditional targets. You know, I am an absolutely normal person, salt of the earth, you know, and I was targeted. Like, I'm not anyone quote unquote special. So anyone can be subject to this. So now I'm going to talk about capabilities of Stalkerware, like spying and stuff like that, and how that applies to different people in different areas, how other targets. So we have children. Of course, children have the parent apps. We have employees where, especially during COVID time, there were articles where bosses were just going crazy scrambling to try to find some sort of spyware that they can put on the devices so that they can monitor everything the employee does. The other thing is journalists. Unfortunately, quite a few journalists have been murdered, like assassinated. So they are often frequently targets of spyware, you know, government grade stuff, right? I mean, yeah. And also too, the people that are friends or close associates of journalists are also targets. So we have dissidents, we have activists, allegedly, you know, the Black Lives Matter people, way back in, I think, 2014, they, Chicago police, law enforcement were actually accused of using some sort of police scanner against them, which had to do with spying on their mobile devices. Hong Kong residents, they were targeted with a watering hole attack to install iPhone spyware. Now that one's sophisticated. And then of course the Dalai Lama was targeted with spyware, and Muslims as well. So basically no one's safe. Criminals, of course they're targeted with it. Terrorists. So this is a really funny story. So WhatsApp sent out a message to their users, and WhatsApp was like, yo, you have been hacked. And so unfortunately, one of the people that they notified was a terrorist that the European law enforcement had used the NSO group spyware to basically track the terrorist. So when WhatsApp was like, hey, you've been hacked, the terrorist was like, oh no, and the trail went cold. So yeah, the terrorists are tracked with it. And then of course, military, there was a ban on TikTok. That would be a dual use app. And I actually did some searching in Spain/Portugal area. And apparently, allegedly, the Catalan politicians, and I apologize if I pronounced that wrong, and pro-independence movement leaders in Spain, they said that their phones were targeted with spyware. And a really great report by Lookout had to do with a stealth mango, which is an MRAT, and it targeted government officials and military people, and then of course law enforcement. So who exactly is using this? So traditional, of course, relationships. And if you look at the Stalkerware vendor breaches, you'll see Metropolitan Police for FlexiSpy as users. Who knows if they were using it officially or if it was, you know, against their partner or someone else, who knows, right? They obviously didn't say. Motherboard filed a legal complaint against the Metropolitan Police for purchasing FlexiSpy. But the Metropolitan Police refused to look into it. So yeah, Moby Stealth, yeah, military, FBI, ICE, DHA, TSA, every 3-letter acronym are buying it with their work email. So operators, similar. to the other ones, right? We have parents, of course, schools. Seattle in the United States, they settled a $610,000 claim for using the webcam on computers to spy on students. And of course, companies, I already told you about the boss, and the FTC banned Retina X from selling Stalkerware as a company. And cybercrime, hacktivists, criminals, terrorists, of course, use it. El Chapo. So I don't know if you know about the drug lord El Chapo. He was notorious for using spyware and stalkerware against his partners and leaders in his organization. And the FBI was like, we can probably get him with that. So they ended up collecting a ton of intel on him through the spyware that he thought he was leveraging to his benefit. So, which ultimately led to his demise. And then law enforcement, Miami had their own spyware made. It was called Penlink, and Sweden got permission to install spyware on criminals' phone devices. I already told you about the motherboard. And then City Lab and Celebrate's known for creating something called cell phone interception devices. So yeah, it's popular. And then nation state. So when the politicians in Spain were saying that they're being targeted by spyware, what is it? Wired came out with a report. Let me double check. Yeah, I believe it was, oh no, it was Vice. So Vice actually said that Spain is involved with domestic espionage against political leaders in their country, and they're using NSO, which is a really well-known like government grade spyware, like a no-click spyware essentially. So of course Spain refused to comment on that. So, and another example is Reckless One, which is a Mexican government APT, and they used Pegasus to go after Javier Valdez Cardenas, which is known for investigating drug cartels, and people that were close to him were targeted just days after his death. So here's some tradecraft that I'm going to share with you. So Kimber, this particular threat actor, not necessarily technically savvy. They do a lot of unilateral access to accounts, and they manipulate friends and family. They love using dual use apps, and they use shared accounts. Like, oh, I saw you logged into such and such an account at such and such a time. Why did you do that, right? And they harass their partners or victims that way. Another one is Suki Win, and this is just your general run-of-the-mill commodity stalkerware operator or spyware, and of course they resort to emotional and psychological abuse. Electra is more technically savvy. They're really good at social engineering and manipulating people, and this is of course the unethical use of social engineering. So, they're technical and they use MRAPs generally. And then Poison Hydra is the one that says, give me your phone or else I'll bash your head in. So they use a lot of physical threats and abuse to gain access and control over their particular victims. So here are some hypotheses, and this is concerning the normal use of commodity stalkerware. So with corporate America, I just suggest being really well-versed in your environment and to read up on it if you're really curious. This is probably the most important slide in this whole presentation, and it has to do with a checkpoint research. And they discovered that 75% of a multinational company's mobile devices were infected with an MRAT. And so they were specifically targeted by someone, and they went after their MDM server, and then they compromised that, and they used it to push an MRAT to the org's mobile devices. And this is a big deal because basically when anyone accessed any type of corporate resources with creds, those creds along with the 2FA codes were compromised. What the org had to do was they had to do a factory reset for all of the mobile devices. So this is real. It happened to a real company, like it's a real threat. So if you use mobile device management, if you have a BYOD program, definitely look into what's going on with that, what people are allowed to install on there, because on the Google Play Store, if you look on there, and I'll show you later, there's there's a ton of spyware and stalkerware on there. The other thing is stalkerware vendors are notorious for being compromised, and they have misconfigs, hacktivists hate them and they try to hack them like all the time. And they have really, really horrible, horrible security practices. So just in the research that I did, these are some of the vendors that have been compromised recently-ish. And I pulled together some stats of the amount of people in domestic violence situations, and then the amount of like stalkerware surveillance that they experienced. So in the United States, about 54% of intimate partner survivors were tracked with stalkerware, and then 25% of just anyone in general of the particular subset of victims have experienced intimate partner violence sometime in their life. So I took a random sampling of about 50,000 or 20,000 employees for the average company and did a 50-50 split between men and women just because the stats were based on that. So I didn't take into consideration all the other genders, excuse me. And so when I did all the math, it came out to about 13.5%. So these are statistics that were created and generated from the United States, from a ton of different organizations that do, like the Citizens Lab did the National Network to End Domestic Violence. So I tried doing some research of what is available in Portugal. So I found the Portuguese Association for Victim Support, and I read, or not read, but I translated, since I don't know Portuguese, I'm sorry. So I tried to translate it to the best of my ability, and looking through their annual report, I found these different things that may or may not be associated with stalkerware. And so when I added it all up based upon the reports that they received for this particular agency, approximately 4.7% of the reported cases had something to do with electronic digital surveillance or something that's related to that in order to track and harass and whatever. So this does apply, just FYI. So here are some CTI hypotheses of repurposed use of stalkerware. We of course have the insider threat. We have executives and employees. Your competitors, they can put stalkerware on your C-suite or key partners in your org. I mean, all I have to do is just listen to their conversations, and back before the age of COVID, I could track what companies they were going to and where they were traveling to get kind of insider information about what they're doing or what they're up to and how to strategically maneuver things, especially if I haven't hacked into your company yet, right? Industrial espionage. I'm not going to name names of countries here, but we recently indicted one here in the United States. That's all I'll say on that. So here are some solutions. The Citizens Lab report has a bunch of IOCs, and I'll show you some more later. So those are things that you can use as well. Definitely recommend. Do not jailbreak any of your phones. Bad. Don't do it. And then stop using TikTok, especially on anything that has any type of corporate anything. You can do tabletops. So you can, like for instance, the MDM solution earlier, you know, do I have one of those? What happens with all the mobile devices? How would an attacker gain access to that? And then awareness, you know, tell your employees never leave your smartphones unattended. Basic security hygiene, I have links for the report that I'll provide you. And then also resources, tallpoppy.io, they deal with a lot of this type of stuff. So if you don't really want to get involved in it, but you want to provide resources to your employees, that's a good resource. Safeescape.org as well, and then stopstalkerware.org. So I went over a lot of high-level stuff for Stalkerware, and now I am going to share with you some more of the technical stuff. So I did an assumption that, let's say that my company gets breached, and I wanted to find out what would be the best avenue, right? And also know the difference between manually reversing an APK versus looking at it on VirusTotal, hybrid analysis, and using like a decompiler or something like that, right? And I used Christina Balan's YouTube video because I definitely am not a reverse engineer, so I had to learn all of this myself. And I am saying, if I can do it, you can do it, and it is okay. So I just threw it in the APK tool, and this is manual, and it ended up giving me all these permissions. So it gave me a good idea of what the heck the APK does, right? In the event we get compromised. And then I threw it in Dex to jar to pull it out, and then I put it in JD GUI to be able to read the Java file, and I was able to look and pull out, I don't know if you can see that, it's a URL, and I'm like, huh, the truth spy, interesting. So then it gives me a good idea. I can look at what they're doing, and then also with the decompiler, it also provides information if you don't want to look at the APK tool, and you don't care about OPSEC type stuff. This also gets it for you a lot easier without having to install a million tools. And VirusTotal, as you can see here, it comes up as only 11 hits on VirusTotal. Some of them say it's malicious, some of them don't. And here, of course, are the permissions again and the domain. So that's good, check, check. We've got both of them. The added benefit though is in hybrid analysis, it also gave me a printout of the various TTPs associated with MITRE attacks, so that's great. I was gonna do it in Ghidra, but I already found out what I needed to know. If you have Ghidra skills, definitely do that. So now we're gonna pivot. I started with the Citizens Lab IOX, right? And then I threw that in VirusTotal, and then I pivoted off that for other referring files and other things that it communicated with, and other requests that they made. Next, I went to the various Stalkerware vendor breaches, and I threw all of those into VirusTotal to see if I could find any additional associations. And I threw everything that I found into a CSV file that I put on GitHub, which I'll share with you. And then in InfoSec Twitter, there was this big thing about an article being written on how to spy on your wife. So I used that as a title or as a search in Google, and found a bunch of additional resources. And then I translated Spy on My Wife into Portuguese, and I also found additional resources as well. And then I went to the Google Play Store and I put in the name of like a popular, Spizy is really popular. So I just threw that in there, and oh look, more samples on the Google Play Store. So then I clicked on those, ended up getting the website, threw that into VirusTotal, picked out anything else I could find. The other thing is I looked at the SSL TLS certs on it and pivoted off those two and found that. Next was looking at security researchers. So NS Crew Tables, if I said that right, he's really big on Stalkerware as well. I highly recommend following him. He had a GitHub full of stuff, so I pulled out the IOX from that. And then I went to Twitter and I just put hashtag Stalkerware APK, and lo and behold, he shows up again. So I pulled those additional IOX. And then of course, Malware Hunter team, they're amazing. I pulled a bunch of stuff that they had on there. They usually alert people. They're like, hey, this one isn't really detected in VirusTotal, so take a look. And then I looked at the various URL categories for the sites. As you can see, one came up as malicious, another one not so much. And then I did a specific search for Portugal, the submitter Portugal, and then various permissions to see the location, look at your camera, take pictures, and your SMS text messages. Nothing came up over the past 90 days, but that doesn't mean that there isn't something. So then there's a Metasploit stagers that I found that was related to that was uploaded. So people are playing with it. And then of course, here's a website. I'm gonna wrap it up, I apologize. You know, sites.google.com, and there is a threat report you can put in your tip, as well as the indicators of emulation, additional information about Stalkerware. Here's the GitHub that I can put in the chat after this is over as well. And thank you very much for your time. And that's it.
Okay. Thank you, Xena. We have some questions here. I think we have too many questions, in fact. This is an interesting topic. It involves everyone. So I have some questions, and I will put some questions here. I will start. I have two questions here that are more. They led us to a big discussion. So I will left them to the end, just to give just a point on that question, and probably Kathleen could talk with you offline to clarify the questions he put here. They're very relevant questions. I will start to ask you, one of the questions is there a simple way of finding out if your phone is running Stalkerware? As an individual, we are not in the area, is it easy, or if you need to be in the area?
Yes. So if you, in my resources, there's a ton of stuff to look at in the threat report that I gave you, but really briefly, if you look at it, this is specific to Android devices. So if you look at the permission setting for Google Play, basically, if it says that it allows download from unknown sources, you can pretty much assume that you are compromised. So I would...
Yeah, the problem here is more with rogue applications and not official applications that should be validated by the app stores correctly.
So, I'm sorry, what? So I just said, check device administrators, Google Play. If Google Play Protect is disabled, you are most likely pwned. And yeah, especially if install apps from unknown sources is enabled.
Yeah. And another question, what advice do you give to people that suspect that their phones are being monitored by their ex-partners or anyone, foreign people? What advice do you give?
Okay, so because I went through it for 2 years, the advice that I give, it doesn't get better, it escalates and it gets worse and it's potentially life-threatening. I would avoid confronting. And I would honestly make an exit plan as soon as possible. If everything that you do is monitored, what I had to do is borrow other people's devices to communicate and get out of the situation. And as soon as I was physically safe, I bought a new device and used that and set up everything new, changed my passwords and all of that. So that's how I personally got out of it. Your situation might be different. Feel free to hit me up on Twitter. I'm happy to chat about this and offer additional resources.
Just a final question, may I?
Yeah.
This is probably a question that could lead to a PhD degree or something like that. How to correlate the context related to a mention, because we are correlating what analysis need to be performed to trigger an alarm, something that you are monitoring and collecting information, and that allows you to suspect that your phone is under vigilance or espionage process.
Oh, well, definitely.
Late and used to. I think this question is important in the scope of a cyber threat intelligence platform. What could you bring to a platform to allow this detection and mitigation?
So on the GitHub that I provided for y'all, there are hashes and domains that are associated with a lot of the Stalkerware vendors that call out. So if they're monitoring your device and it's on the corporate network, you will see traffic for those particular Stalkerware vendors, essentially. You know, that's one way to alert. Some of the Stalkerware, some of the AV vendors like Kaspersky, they will notify you if an app has quote unquote too many permissions. Because what I do when I look at something is I look at the permissions. Like, why the heck would they need to look at my calendar and my contacts and all of that when it's not an app that's, do you know what I mean? So looking at those permissions, throwing it in the decompiler really quickly. The slides are available on GitHub. So feel free to pull those down, and I detailed everything in there with the technical steps. And there's also like 5 pages of references. And feel free to reach me on Twitter as well. And I apologize for going over, and thank you very much for the time.
Yeah, thank you. I
And
think
thank
we'll
you for
finish
having
with
me.
we have more questions, but I will finish the questions here because we can do it offline and to keep the time, keep the track on time. So thank you again, Xena, for your presentation.